Hello, my name is Amber Bean, and today we're going to talk a little bit about budget management in higher education and specifically about the problems and pitfalls that budget managers may experience. As I'm sure you know, budget management is a complex process. It's not the most exciting thing in higher education, but it is extremely important and it is connected to every aspect of your institution. Today, we're going to discuss some common issues that budget managers have to deal with, and these issues will be anywhere from understanding your stakeholders, to include your board of directors, your faculty and staff, to the political and personal intricacies of your entire institution, and how all of these play a part and can present problems as well as opportunities for budget managers. Some of the challenges that we'll come across in the budget managing process can be mitigated by the following things. So you need to make sure that you understand your organization and how the decisions have historically been made in your organization. So each institution is different. Each unit within each institution is different. You need to know how the unit functions by itself. You need to know how the unit functions within the organization. You need to know all of the components of the organization. So if you haven't reviewed the organizational chart, you need to make sure that you do that so that you understand the hierarchy and all of the stakeholders in the budget management process. All of this can help you understand how to create partnerships within the organization for budgeting purposes, how to know who to ask questions. These different pieces can help provide you with data in your budget planning process. And you need to understand the budget history of the organization. So how has budgeting been done in the past? Was it successful? And how is that success defined? Is it a centralized budget? Is it a top-down? So, all decisions are made by administration. Is it a decentralized budget? Are there bottom-up decisions? Are you changing from one type of budgeting to another type? And what kind of expectations do you have moving forward? Is there ample training provided for the budgeting process? Are all of the members of the budgeting process capable? This includes you. Are there extra training? Is there extra training that could be helpful in moving forward so that all stakeholders have a better understanding of budgeting? Is the current budget valid? Has it been checked and rechecked for accuracy? This historical review can certainly help you avoid problems before they become chronic problems or before they waste a lot of time. That leads us into identifying and differentiating between one-time and chronic problems. So chronic problems are typically not easily solved, and they usually build year after year. Because the budgeting for one unit usually affects other units, this can create a real nightmare. So examples would be overspending and underreporting. So if one unit overspends and underreports, then this can create a chronic problem over time and a chronic debt that will affect all aspects of the institution. So for this scenario, you would need a short-term and a long-term solution. So a short-term solution could be something like reducing the target spending within the unit. And then a long-term solution could be searching for new revenue sources and getting creative with partnerships. And then managing change. So if you are changing up your budgeting process, or if you have some changing of the guard within your institution, or even if budgeting has been affected by changes in state or federal appropriations, no one likes change. And so large or small, it's very difficult, and it's certainly difficult to manage when money is involved. So, some strategies for managing change include investing your members in the process, figuring out what's working, what's not working, what's frustrating, how you can work together to come up with some creative solutions. Some pitfalls to avoid as you're moving through the budget process. Reliance on handshake deals is an unavoidable part of higher education budgeting, but you need to make sure that it's backed up and followed up with written correspondence. So, doing so will avoid miscommunication that can snowball. You'll avoid reliance on memory, which is never a good thing. And deals can be forgotten if they aren't followed up on and written down. Another pitfall to avoid is overestimating revenue. A lot of times departments will get really excited about a new program and think that it's going to be really, really successful, and it certainly may be. However, you should always be conservative with your revenue projections, even if you're optimistic. It's always better to end up with more money than to end up with less money. You need to make sure that you have accounted for 1 year versus multi-year funding opportunities. So if you have a grant-funded budget item that needs to continue into the future, you need to have a contingency plan. Is that grant going to continue to pay for the program, or do you need some sort of plan moving forward? And then you need to make sure that you check your math. Overestimating revenue can sometimes just be as simple as you forgot to check your math. Accuracy can't be overstated. You want to make sure that you don't postpone problems because they never go away. A lot of times something that's a small problem can turn into a really big problem if it's not addressed right away. An example of this would be, like we talked about in the previous slide, a small deficit that's being absorbed by a department year after year may not seem like a big deal, but as time passes, it could turn into a really big chronic problem. And not asking for help. Nobody has the answers to everything, so you need to make sure that you seek out help when it's necessary, and ask for help before it becomes a big problem. You need to make sure that you understand the best use of your time, and could someone else solve the problem faster and easier. And then failing to identify hidden costs. This often happens with a new project proposal or a new program. Some hidden costs could be new space costs or additional facilities costs, furniture, utilities, that type of thing. So you want to make sure that all of these costs are accounted for when evaluating a new program. And you can be creative in your solutions. Can old space be repurposed? Can costs be shared via an inter-unit partnership? And then failing to plan for continued funding of a project. And this also goes along with the next item of failure to identify multi-year consequences. So if you have a multi-year program that's being grant funded or donation funded, and you don't have a contingency plan for the following years, and then you have to shut the program down, what are the unintended consequences of that program shutting down? So making sure that you evaluate far into the future and have a plan for continued funding. And then failing to understand the implications for others goes along with what we just talked about. So minimizing unintended consequences, and then making sure that you have equality among your funding decisions. So you want to make sure that all departments are considered in the same equitable way. And then finally, which I'm not really sure we do this anymore given the funding climate recently, but assuming that the good times will continue. You always need to plan for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then some questions that you need to ask as you're overcoming pitfalls that we just talked about. Again, accuracy and revenue estimates. And make sure that those numbers are correct. What assumptions created the figures? So did you do your historical research? Are hard times planned for? Are chronic issues addressed? Are there long-term issues that need to be addressed? Are the reserve funds present and adequate? Again, are time-limited grants currently being used? So you want to make sure that if you have funding that has a time limit on it, that you're using it and that you have plans once it's gone. Multi-year consequences of continuing or discontinuing programs. Have hidden costs been identified and accounted for? Are there far-reaching consequences of budget decisions, meaning far-reaching within the institution and far-reaching within into the future? And finally, have all of the stakeholders, including faculty and staff, board of directors, community members, and so on, been consulted in the budgeting process? And strategies for handling pitfalls include asking questions. Always ask more questions and make sure that you ask the questions earlier than later. You want to make sure that you are prepared and that you've done your homework. And you want to make sure that you're honest. Don't cover up mistakes or string people along. So if funding is not available for a project, then just be honest that it's not available. Doing so can lead you to the next point, which is being creative with funding sources. So if you know that you don't have the money, the sooner you can look at creative sources and partnerships, the better. You need to make sure that you know what your decision makers need and make sure that you get it to them. Don't be afraid to say that you don't know and then go find the information. Pay attention to the details. Devil is in the details. You want to check, recheck, and recheck for accuracy. Assume nothing, especially if you are coming into a new budget management role. Don't assume that budget processes that were previously done are correct, successful, or accurate. And then make sure that you seek legal advice if it's needed, particularly when you're dealing with contracts or personnel issues. And finally, don't play games when you're budgeting. So inflating budget requests, withholding information, hiding money, any of those strategies that you think is going to get you more money never works, always backfires, and just makes you look like you are not trustworthy. So you want to make sure that you never inflate the budget requests, that make sure that you never present only the worst scenario, and make sure that you don't politicize the budget process. There's no need for lobbying for certain budget requests. Budgeting is not necessarily a fun process, but it doesn't have to be painful. So if you would take the time to do your homework, evaluate the entire picture, understand your organization, ask questions, seek help, and be honest, the budgeting process can be successful for you and for your unit and your organization as a whole. Thank you.